Let me welcome to you my friend and Chicago's coolest journalist, my friend Christian Farr, NBC 5 Chicago. What's up, Christian?
What's up, Mike? I don't know about coolest. I'm something, but I don't know about
Nah,
coolest. People have said that, but I just try to be me.
nah, super cool. First and foremost, thanks for taking a little bit out of your day, especially your day off. So I want to try to get through this. I know it's the weekend, and I just want to say thanks for taking the time to spend with me and my audience. So thanks a lot for that, Christian. How you doing today?
I'm good, and I think this is important. It's important to connect to the audience on different platforms, and podcasts are the newest and greatest thing. And so I
Yeah.
people look at it, and hopefully it just helps somebody.
Yeah, yeah. And let me just kind of bring up to date or bring up to speed my audience. I met Christian on NBC 5 Telemundo's Community Action Board, which is a board of entrepreneurs, Black, Latino, from all over Chicagoland and our inner cities. And as entrepreneurs, we have a voice and we also have ears. And what NBC Telemundo is doing to get our voices out there to the Chicago community is a big deal. And so I was invited as a guest, and I have a passion when it comes to youth mentorship and mental health, and I threw those topics out there, and Christian, he found interest to it, and Christian, thank you for that, and that just made me eager to get you on the show and to get him on. And today, of course, on his day off, we got him on. So thank you again. And Christian, tell us a little bit about, are you from Chicago, or where are you from?
It's funny. I've been here for 16 years, and people ask me that all the time. And I don't know if it's because I don't have a thick accent or anything, that people just assume I'm from this area. I am not. I grew up out east, in the little state of Wilmington, Delaware.
Wow.
My father was in
Okay.
the military, and so actually all my family is from the New Jersey, New York area. And so when
Okay.
my father got out of the military, he had to go find a job in Delaware. If you know your geography, where I grew up is like an hour outside of Philly, like 2 hours outside of New York. So it was it's very suburban where I grew up, but
Yeah.
very beautiful area. Went to school there, college as well, and that's where my love for journalism came from.
And I was about to ask you that. What did you see somebody on TV where you were like, man, I want to be like him, or I want to be a reporter? Because I love interviewing people, but when I was a kid, I didn't want to be a journalist.
Yeah, the answer to that is no. I did not want to be a journalist. There was no one on TV who inspired me. It's actually
Wow.
kind of a weird story. So, as a young black kid growing up during the time that I did, the push was really to get you into engineering,
Mm.
to get you into the sciences, computer science. So, my cousin, who we're the same age, went to the same college. He went the engineering route, and I was going towards computer science. I just wasn't feeling it. Didn't want to work in an office all day. And actually, my first love, I really wanted to do, was make movies. That's what I wanted to do. But my father had encouraged me not to do that. He didn't
I
want.
don't know.
My brother is a struggling artist. He's been a struggling artist for a long time. I love him to death, but I didn't want to live wondering where the next paycheck was going to come from.
Yeah.
So, just a short story. I was at home in between classes. My parents had always watched the news when I was growing up, and just one day I decided to watch the news. A story caught my eye. I was watching it, and the reporter came on, and suddenly they threw to this story. I looked at the story and I said to myself, wait a second, that's like a mini movie. I said I could actually do this.
Mm.
So I'm a research based person. I went out and did all the research that I could. I went to the Career Center, figured it all out, and came back to my parents because I had to report back to them. What are you going to do with your life? And I said, well, I think I'm going to be a journalist. I think I'm going to be a television news reporter. I like broadcast. I like mixing the pictures with the images and the words and everything. And so they said, can you make money at it? And I said, yeah. And I said, here's the proof. And I showed it to them. And that began my journey
Hmm.
because I had nobody in my family. I'm married to a journalist, but her father was in the business as well. I had nobody in my family. My father was a retired Air Force pilot. My mother was a teacher turned stay-at-home mother. And
Wow.
like I said, my brother was an artist, My cousin was an
Wow.
engineer. My other cousin is
Wow.
in marketing. So I had nobody. So I had to start this from the ground up. And I just started with radio, newspaper. We had a very small television program. I immersed myself in that. And then it was just networking, which is what every job is. It's networking. It's who
Sure.
you meet. And that's how I got in.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, you've been here, you said 16 years?
Yes, yeah. I came here
So,
back in 2006. Yeah.
wow. And so over the years, especially now as a journalist, what is the common thread that you're seeing as far as like crime? And I hate to make a fun podcast because I'm all about fun, community, and having a great time, but there's things in our communities that go unspoken, and at the end of the day we're the ones that suffer, our kids are the ones that suffer. And so that's why I think it's so important to talk about mental health, right? And all of that. And so with that, what is the common thread that you're seeing on the street with today's offenders?
Well, Mike, let me take a step back and just kind of go through my career just a little bit to give some context to that. I've worked in major metropolitan cities, not just Chicago. I started my career working in the New York market. And so I was working in places like Camden, New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey. I went off to Dayton, Ohio, which is kind of a bit of a microcosm of Chicago. While
Sure.
we focus on the north and south sides of Chicago, we also have to include the west side as well. But we really, outside of this city, we're focused on the north and
Hmm.
the south side of Chicago, and we say that the south side gets sort of the shorter end of the deal. Well, Dayton, Ohio had
Sure.
the east and west side, and so it was
Interesting.
kind of similar. And you had that focus on crime that was there. So now you fast forward to my time getting here in Chicago. When I came here in 2006, there was a young woman who, I think she was a preteen or a teen, who was shot and killed inside of her house, stray bullet. Now, I'd worked in Philadelphia for 6 years prior to that. I covered crime,
Yeah.
North Philadelphia,
Yeah.
West
Good.
Philadelphia, all parts of the city. And so I knew crime, but it was really, really an uptick here. It was kind of unbelievable. And so 10 years later, after I came here, probably about, not even 10 years, a little bit more than 10 years, 2020, another young girl about the same age was inside of her house, was shot and killed, just like this previous girl when I got here in 2006. So you have this same kind of common denominator that happens. But if you're not going into these communities, there are great people on the south side of Chicago. There are great people on the west side of Chicago. But there is a lot of despair in those communities as you just drive through. And as journalists, we drive into those communities. I think that's the most rewarding thing, is to see how people live. I've seen people who live on the top of a mountain, and I've seen people who
Mhm.
live at the bottom of it. And I think when you live in these kind of conditions and there's no access to anything, we should not be surprised when you have kids getting on a train and coming to downtown. They're trying to escape something. If they don't have anything in
Mhm.
their communities, what do you expect them to do? Now, should they be
Yeah.
committing crimes? No, I'm not condoning that at all. But we've got to do something for those kids in those communities. And, you and I have talked offline about the mental health of this. There's a huge mental health aspect that is completely avoided. And it's getting more attention. I've done stories on it because black men need to express themselves. And if they're holding something
Absolutely.
inside, you probably say the same thing about the Latino community, holding that
Yeah.
stuff inside, the bravado.
Yeah. Yeah.
Men have to be able to get that out and be given
Mhm.
opportunities. If you have fatherless homes, it's difficult, but doesn't mean you
It
can't
is.
survive. But we
Yeah.
have to be there to help people. There's got to be a little bit more of that. And I think, the commitment in news now has shifted from simply reporting on crime and actually telling those backstories as well, and all
Yeah.
the good things that people are doing, because people need to see that.
And I think this is why I wanted to have this dialogue with you about this, Christian, because we see the need for it, right? We see the need for it. And you hit the nail on the head. You said it's hard for black men to come up and be vocal. Latino, right? It's the same way. Like Mexican, machista, right? Our dad is like, no, 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 work, work, work. This is the way you do it. Pride, 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 right? This is who you are. This is who you're always going to be. You never show a tear. You never show your soft spot. And we're raised that way. And then we meet our significant other, or we meet our partner. And then what happens? We bring that, and we're trying to decipher the other person's thoughts, and we're making these assumptions, and then we don't really get to the core of it. And I think this is why I was so engaged talking to you about this topic, because I wanted to be the first one in my circle to be like, hey, look, I struggle too, right? Like, I'm a human being. My dad was gone at a very, very young age. So a lot of that spilled out. And so for an entrepreneur that like myself that says, okay, how do I become a businessman? Well, let me reverse a little bit. How do I become a man?
Right.
And so
That's
how do I evolve into that, right? And so I wanted to get your take on that, because you came from a military home, a military family, which thank you and your family for the sacrifice. But tell us a little bit about how you're, I don't want to say adjusting to it, because you're already adjusted. You to us, you're a Chicagoan, Christian. We see you on the news and we're like, that's our boy.
yeah.
But giving us the news every day, I know that you look for always a brighter spot with our youth. Tell us a little bit about how NBC and yourself, because I know that you're always looking for those great stories, and especially with our youth.
Yeah, let me be completely and 100% honest. I think a lot of us as journalists, it's a struggle to cover crime day in and day out, right? And so when I first started at NBC 13 years ago, I initially worked at WTTW Chicago Tonight for about 3 years to get into the market. And the enjoyment of working there is that I got to see the political workings and to do a little bit more in-depth reporting and meet with people a little bit longer. When you go to a commercial TV station, that time is greatly reduced. And of course, part of it is the pay is better when you're working for a public broadcasting station where you're begging for money. But I think, when I initially came here, I said, hey, I worked in Philadelphia for 6 years. And for people who don't understand the Philadelphia market, it's a unique market because it covers 3 states. So instead of covering one governor like we do here, because we really don't cover Indiana, we cover Indiana, but not as much as you do when you
Yeah.
work in Philadelphia. You cover the governor of Delaware, you cover the governor of New Jersey, and you cover the governor of Pennsylvania. Then you can just kind of branch out from that when it comes to coverage. And you have problems in all of these states. No place
Sure.
is perfect. But when I got here to Chicago, there was a whole lot of violence going on, which I don't think has diminished a great deal. I think a lot of it is still there. And there were a lot of door knocks that I was doing, especially to black mothers who had lost their children. And so that becomes depressing. And you sort of you get on this cycle. I really have to say, and I said this during that community action board, when George Floyd was killed by police, it changed me, and I think it changed a lot of other people. It changed the station. There was this sort of wake up call that, yes, we have black employees in our building. We need to hear from them. We have minority employees. We need to hear from them. And so I think the shift kind of happened there. I was doing good stories prior to that, but there became a greater commitment to that because you really have to focus on the great things that are happening on the south side of Chicago, Pilsen, Little Village. I didn't care. It doesn't just have to be black to me. There's a great things going on in the Latino community. There's great things going on in the Asian community. And we know there's a lot of crime in those communities. But there's a lot of people doing a lot of good. This is doing good because you're talking about it from a different perspective. And you're allowing
Sure.
more than just the news story. The problem with the news story that I always have is that we are relegated by time and you really can't tell the whole story. And there's a bunch of people doing a lot of good stuff, trying to change things. And I think that's where my commitment is now. Yes, I got to do that daily news. Yes, we got to report on that crime. But we also have to have a heck of a lot of empathy for these communities and a heck of a lot of empathy for these people because they deserve better. And I think it's got to be a collective sort of thing.
You said something that made me think right away. We look at police officers and all the crime that they witness, first responders, but we didn't really think about you guys, right? As journalists, because you guys see a lot of stuff too, and they may back you up a lot of times. They put the rope, and then you guys are. I get that, but sometimes you guys get there and you see things that the regular folks don't get to see, right? And so when you said mental health for you is very important too, because you get to go home after seeing these things and reporting on them, it's like I got to come home and just hug my family, right? And I think that was one thing that I wanted you to touch on, like as a journalist, how do you just say, okay, like today's your day off, and I don't even want to talk about crime on your day off because you do this every day. How do you just say I'm gonna unplug and say, I got to go back out Sunday night, so I want to be
Right.
fresh? How do you refresh yourself?
That's an excellent question. I get to come home. you know,
That's
admittedly, I live on a safe block. I live in a safe community.
sure.
And, my father is still around. I still have him in my life. He's my hero. So is my mother. I had two
Yeah.
heroes and two people who never gave up on me. But my father before me, his father walked out on him and never came back. He didn't find out what happened to him until decades later. To realize that, it's interesting. I'll tell a quick aside. When I first moved here, I didn't know this. There's quite a bit of black people with the last name of Farr. It's not a common last name, and they'd reach out to me
Yeah.
on social media, and I would tell them I'm not really a Farr because I found out about the age of 12 that my parents hadn't told me initially that my father was adopted by his stepfather. My grandmother remarried, and he took his last name. So my father was
Wow.
not born John Farr. That's his name. And so I took kind
Wow.
of great offense to that for many decades until my mother-in-law talked to me and said, "Hey, your father has created a new family line and he's done a good job at it." And I said, maybe I need to
Amazing.
change my perspective. But as you're talking about dealing with this stuff, it was very hard in the beginning when I covered these stories because it was repeated. Talking to a crying mother is not easy, and then getting them to go on camera to do that is still not simple. And then the other part is you
No.
become desensitized to it. It almost becomes it's sad to say. If you ever, the one thing I would say, if you could stand around a bunch of journalists covering this kind of story and hear the conversation, there's just some of us are just get really sad. You get really emotional. You think about your children.
Yeah.
If you think about
Yeah.
a young kid who's assaulted or dies, and you come home to your own children and you hug them really tightly, it changes your perspective on things. And so there was one reporter in particular at one of the local news stations who, she basically had PTSD because of having to do all of these in-depth interviews with people. It is a struggle. It's
Yeah.
a struggle for police officers. I respect police officers. We do have these police-involved shootings, but I've talked to a lot
Sure.
of great police officers.
Oh
Do we
yeah.
need to make changes in law
Absolutely.
enforcement? Wholeheartedly. But there are a lot of great police officers out there doing a lot of great work. And so
Yeah.
they deserve support as well. And the problems in communities go
Absolutely.
well beyond simply having police show up there or us telling a story. There's a lot more that needs to be
Right.
done, and I just think I'm trying to do my part in giving that positive view,
Yeah.
because you need a
Yeah.
positive view of minorities, not just black people, minorities
Right.
in general,
Right.
because
Exactly.
we all have these stereotypical
Exactly.
views, and those views have to change.
And I think that's another thing that I just like to push hard, and I know this is another reason why we wanted to continue our dialogue. Um, the father, you nailed it, my father, right? You said it, and however, whatever that looks like for someone in a positive sense, it's like whether it was a role model, a mentor, a father, a stepdad, that is very much missing in the lives of our young people. And I think this is why I wanted to get you on, and I want to continue this dialogue because there are some great organizations that are doing things like you have a grip outreach for youth, right? That focuses on youth mentorship in the city of Chicago. You have Hood Heroes that are going to our neighborhoods, and they're helping the neighborhood clean it up and be there for our community. So there's many people doing many good things, and I definitely want to plug you with those organizations that are out there that need a voice, that need funding. Sometimes they need donors, right? And I think that when we can say, hey, look, this is a positive group doing things for our youth, I think that sometimes they need the funds to keep it going, right? And so I definitely want to plug you. If there's organizations out there that are watching, that are listening, that have great news and are doing some impactful, positive things in the city of Chicago with our youth, please reach out to Christian Farr. Christian, if people want to find you, where do they find you besides the news, bud? Where would they be able to contact?
You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. Christian Farr TV is what it's under. So it's just at Christian Farr TV. You can easily just type my name into Google for NBC, and you
Yeah.
can find my email address. Email me. And any way that you want to try to get in contact with me. There's Twitter as well, which I believe is Chris Farr TV. But these stories have to be told, and I think you really hit it with those organizations. My father had a stepfather who stepped in
Yeah.
because he wanted to become a pilot. He wanted to fly airplanes, and this man who became his stepfather had been in the military as well. And he told him, "You can do it." And he had friends and supporters who told him he could do it. Now, I have to tell you, the time period is when my father was flying was the generation that came after the Tuskegee Airmen. So he really benefited from what these men
Amazing.
did, and he was able to command his own aircraft in the 1960s. He had white men under him who came out of the United
Look at
States Air
that.
Force Academy. So
Awesome.
that is he was my hero. But prior to him,
Hero.
this there could have been a bumpy road for him. But
Sure.
luckily,
Wow.
my parents have been together for nearly 60 years, and so
That's
I'm
awesome.
I'm I'm happy to have. He's always been my role model. He's always been my hero. But so is my mother.
Yeah.
There's a ton of black mothers who are
Sure.
playing dual roles. There's a ton of Latino
Sure.
mothers who are playing dual roles
Oh
as
yeah.
well.
Oh
But
yeah.
there's a lot of Latino men who are doing their job as well. And so
Sure.
you got to profile those people too, because that is really, I mean, I could have gone down a bad road. I could have, even
Yeah.
though I grew up in a nice
Sure.
area, I could have gone down a bad road. But I had people in my corner, an entire family of other fathers. I have an uncle who guided me as well. So those father figures are so very, very important. They are vital. But can you survive without them? Yes, you can. There are surrogates that can come in. The
That's right.
organizations that you're talking about, you've connected me with. They're huge. That's really a big deal because this is what's going to deter that crime. It's the young
Yeah.
people who are looking
That's
for
right.
support and father figures. That's what they're looking for.
That's
And
right.
so, if
That's
there's
right.
no father figure in that home and there's nobody else who's coming forward, it's the street that's going to take them. And so, hey, the
That's
street
right.
looks good.
There's going to be a mentor.
Yeah, there's going
Right.
to be a mentor.
There's going to be a mentor. The question is,
Right.
what kind of mentor?
Right. Selling
Right.
drugs,
What
going
kind of
downtown,
mentor?
breaking into buildings. That's what you're going to end up
Right.
with. So I think it's more than just calling up the police and telling them to respond. It's more than that. And so you
Exactly.
can't put it all
It's
on
more
them.
than
There's a
that.
whole lot of focus on that. There's got to
Yeah.
be a focus on the social service part of this. There's got to be a focus on the grassroots people. Like you said, they need funding. They need support. There are people who are one-man operations that should be 20-man operations. But
That's
I
right.
think there's a
That's
lot of
hard.
good that's going on. I profiled a lot of good people over these past like 3 years, and they're doing great work,
That's
and they
awesome.
continue to do great work. And the more we profile them, the more people know what they're doing.
Exactly. Exactly. Christian, as we bring it to a landing, there's young men that are watching right now, right? There's young black men that are watching right now that are being tugged with the street and school. There's young Latino men that are being tugged with going to work on the streets selling drugs because their dad left, and then like, but they want to pursue good. They want, whether it's TV or just selling cars, whatever the case may be. What advice do you give to our young men and young women who, like I said, that need that role model, that mentorship, and they don't have it, but they need that push, and they see people like you on the news, and they say, "Man, I want to do that." What advice do you have for them?
I have a mentee. His name is Glenn Marshall. He's a reporter at WGN. Mentored him for about
Yeah,
10
Glenn
years.
Marshall Jr.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
Glenn. I saw him when he was just getting into this business. You should have Glenn on. He
I
is
want. He's such a cool
he
dude
is
too.
an
Yeah.
inspiration to me, but I helped guide his career. I don't take credit for it. I
That's
helped guide it.
awesome.
He will tell you that I made his career. That's just not the case. I will tell you about this young man because
Wow.
he's the true example. He was a networker. I was doing a story at the college he went to, which escapes me right now. But I was doing a story there. He walked up to me. I ignored him initially because I was so involved in my story that I blew him off.
Sure.
Uh, but Glenn didn't stop. He he saw me again, and I still kind of blew him off. And then he knew somebody who worked at my station by the name of Pam Oliver, who is a fantastic community relations producer. She knows everyone, and so he knew
Sure.
Pam Oliver, and so he just walked back up to me and he goes, "Hey, I met you when you were covering a story at my school," and I said, "Yeah," and he goes, "You blew me off." I said I did, and I felt bad about it. And so
Wow.
he engaged me. He would come in on weekends and go out with me and do stories. But here's the key about Glenn Marshall: he was an excellent networker. He just networked. Contact people. If you want to do something in particular, contact that person. And if you think they're not going to respond to you, you'll be sadly mistaken. There are people who have just contacted me out of the clear blue for an event. And I responded, and they're like, I can't believe you responded. And I said, why not? I'm a human being, you're a human
That's
being.
awesome.
I don't think that you're any better than me, and I'm no better than you, you know? So the thing is that we're all equal on this planet. I don't care if you got a
That's
million
right.
dollars or $10 million or like
That's
LeBron got a
right.
billion. LeBron is still a man,
That's
and he
right.
can't take it
True.
with him when he goes to the
That's
next
right.
lifetime. So if you want to reach out to
Sure.
LeBron, reach out to LeBron. Reach out to LeBron's cousin. Who knows?
Sure.
It's
Who
networking.
knows?
That's what's going to get you
Wow.
into any business, I think. When you finally meet that person, you say, hey, I want to be a television news reporter. Contact me. I got no problem with that, and I will guide you. I will help anyone because I think that we need
Yeah.
people of color in this business, really need people of color. We need people of color in management
Yeah.
positions who understand what's going on in certain communities, not just black. We need Latino. Our upper management is majority white and majority white male. And
Sure.
so that's the perspective
Sure.
you're going to get. You really need to kind of change that perspective. And so I would say network.
Wow.
And if you want to do something,
Wow.
immerse yourself in it. That's what I did. I immersed myself in it. I lived on my brother's couch for 6 months and did an unpaid internship to get into television. And when I got to the end of that unpaid
Yeah.
internship, I was offered a job. And that was my start in TV. And so that's
Yeah.
what Glenn Marshall did. Glenn Marshall, he didn't sleep on my couch, but he kind of did that. And then he got his first job
Sure. Yeah.
in Springfield, and now he works in Chicago after 10 years of
Yeah.
doing this, and he's doing an excellent job.
Yeah. We got to get Glenn on.
Yeah, and I've got a mentee that works in Philadelphia who just walked up to me one day at the
Yeah.
station and said, "Would you help me?" I said, my rule has always been this to mentees. I say, "Look, I already have a job, but if you want to get one, you got to chase me down." Because I'm a busy
Wow.
person. I got a
That's
lot of
so
stuff
cool.
going on. But if you come
Yeah.
to me, I'm going to help you no matter what. But you got to come to me. You got to show up on my terms. And everybody has followed
Yeah.
that, and all the people who have followed that have been successful. They've done very well.
And that's the student
Hmm.
teacher, right? The student pursues the
Right.
teacher because they're eager to learn and learn more and more.
Yes.
Christian, this was awesome having you on. I mean, everyone usually at the end, what advice do you have for young people? Keep reaching for the stars and never give up.
No.
Yeah, those are great things. But I love when you just bring practical, just something so practical. Get out there and talk to people.
Yes.
You'd be amazed at who you may meet and what they may do for you.
Yeah. So I was raised. I like to say I was raised by a realist. My mother always looked at things in a real sense, and so it's a
Wow.
blessing and a curse because sometimes you have to accept something that you don't want to accept.
Yeah.
But if you look at the
You
reality of
don't
a
want to.
situation, most of the time, it's not about all the education in the world. Hey, look, get the bachelor's degree. I think you should. It's going to open up a ton of doors. Go get an associate's degree. Go to a community college. Do whatever you can. Chicago's got a great community college program. But network. Everybody's got a mobile phone. It's
Network.
not just for taking pictures and posting on Instagram. Write down those
That's
phone
right.
numbers. Write them down. Text people. People love texting. It's a heck of a lot better than phone calls sometimes. Text someone.
Sure.
It is no longer a non-formal thing. You can text someone. I got people texting me all the time, and they say, "Hey, I want to get an internship at NBC. Let me. I know who to talk to. Let me talk to that person." I tell
Yeah.
them to stay
Yeah.
on top of it. Do not give up, because the worst thing that anybody's going to say to you is no. That's the worst thing. They're not going to beat you up.
Yeah.
They're going to
Yeah.
say no,
You're
and
right.
when they say
It's
no,
fun.
move on to the next
It's
thing.
That's right. Mike Diakendo, he's a comedian that I've known him for, since I was a kid. And that's what he said. He said, for the young comedians, just get on stage. The worst, they're not going to beat you up. They're going to just say, no, boo, get off. And then you just keep going. But yeah,
That's what
but
you do.
you try,
Yeah, yeah,
you try.
yes.
Christian, thank you so much. It's your day off. What are you doing here with me, man? Go with your family.
No, this is important.
Thank you
Very
so much.
important. No problem, Mike.
We will talk soon. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.